So first of all, thanks for everyone here. Really nice to have people come and join in on the project. Um, so I want to do like a kind of introduction to the code base, so you have like a easy onboarding if you want to come in and contribute. So just I'll give you the basics of what the library is and the motivations behind it and everything. So up until now, the main library for and now as well, the main library for using Google Maps inside React is called React Google Maps, and it's a really great library, but it's unmaintained for a really long time. No one's been touching it. The maintainer isn't touching it, and no one has access. So just people started kind of doing their own thing. So what we did, me and Alexei, he's the other guy that's working on this. So it's basically a rewrite of that library, but a rewrite that supports kind of the new features of React, if it's the new context API, and a lot of things that were blocking from using React in strict mode. Like if you use strict mode today with React to Google Maps, you're going to get a lot of errors. So we kind of made it use the modern React features, plus shaved a lot of dependencies, and now with the TypeScript rewrite and the hooks rewrite we're going to work on. So that's the direction. So I'm not sure if all of you had a chance to work with the Google Maps API in general. So I'll just show you a quick example of how you do it with the Google Maps API, and then how you do it with React Google Maps API, and then like we'll just see in the code how it works. So this is the demo, the circle demo I took off of the Google Maps examples, like the reference. So basically, what you have here, we've got the Google Maps script loading inside the HTML. It has a callback function, and then it calls that function. That function instantiates a map object, which is the map we see here. So just new Google Map. I'm doing an event listener on my button here. I'll show it in a second. We have some data for circles, and then it just goes and creates the circles, instantiates them with the options. Okay, so these are just some options it passes, and then it gives them the map and the center and the radius. Okay, and I also put like an event listener. When radius changes, then this is called. And this button, basically what it does is it sets the radius for each circle. Okay, so it goes over every circle and it does set radius, and it just takes the current radius and multiplies it. So just whenever I click it, the radius increases and the callback is called. So we have a few things here. We have the instantiation of the map and of the circles. We have property changes, and we have event handling. These are basically the only things this library does. It's like really simple, and it only deals with these three things, which is instantiating the Google Maps object, handling property changes and translating them into changes on the map, and doing event handling. So that's it. So we'll look at it right now. I was doing this right now, so I didn't really finish yet, but I did the same example here with React Google Maps. Let me just finish that quickly. So it would be okay. I think this should be working as well. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So same thing with. Let's look at the same implementation with React Google Maps API. The basic thing is you have a load script component, which that is the component that loads the Google Map script. I've got my key here, but it's restricted to this sandbox. But basically, if you wanna use Google Maps, you have to have an API key. Okay. The docs have a link to how to create one. So I just pass some properties, and this component is in charge of loading the script, which is the same thing like we did in this example in the index.html. So we load the script with this component. Once it's loaded, I can render the children. So the first child is always the map. Google Map is the thing responsible for rendering the map. It also accepts a few properties like some styles to put on the container, like so I can change that, and I'm changing the height and the zoom of the map and the center of the map, and then I just map over the data here, the city data, and I create a circle component for each one. I give it a center, I give it a radius, and I give it just some starting options. Same thing as we did, but in the React, a more React way, okay? So, and this button just basically increases the radius factor, so it does the same thing. So you can see when the prop changes, the radius prop changes, so the changes are seen on the map. Oh, and the event handling, so I can pass a onRadius changed prop, which takes a function, and now I have everything exactly the same as in the example. Okay, so let's look at the. Let me know if it's not big enough or something. Wait, I'll make it smaller.
I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but
yeah,
like the video quality seems to be lagging pretty hard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, same for me.
Oh, sorry. So, were you able to follow like what I showed now, or is it?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly, okay. So I'll just. But is this like? Is it visible? Do you see the code correctly right now? Do you see it like okay?
This looks pretty good,
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll try doing less quick movements, and that hopefully the VS Code is just popping this pop-up all the time. I hope it doesn't drive us crazy. Okay, so I'll start by going over the folders very quickly. Sorry, so the repository, it uses something called Lerna, which basically allows you to manage a few different projects inside the same repository. So you can see there's a docs project, which is the old docs. We're going to be deleting it once the TypeScript branch lands. There's a Gatsby app, which is just like a playground we use to put in examples, and that way we can, whenever we do changes, we can test them on these examples we've made. And someone also added Storybook, which is like kind of a library for doing quick mockups. I don't really use it. I just use the docs basically to check my work. So, and there's the React Google Maps API, which is the main library which has the code. So I'll go into that. And oh, sorry. Packages. Okay, cool. So this is our main library. We have the source, which holds the entire source, the lib, which is the build source after we compile it, and that's. So I'm not gonna go over all the components right now. Maybe if we have time, but I want to just look at our circle component, which is the one that we were looking at in the demo. Basically, the components here, they're divided by different like Google Maps categories, but you basically have the info box and the directions renderer and overlay view, circle, rectangle, everything you have in the Google Maps API pretty much we've implemented here, except for some stuff that haven't been implemented yet. But like pretty much every component looks exactly the same. They follow, like, some of them are a bit different, but they follow a very, very, very similar pattern. So I'm going to go over the pattern. So the three things I said the library takes care of is instantiating the Google Maps object, handling property changes, and handling event handlers. So I'm gonna just go over each of them, how it does each of them. So how does it instantiate? This is our circle class. How does it, so when you create a circle component, how does it actually create a circle on the map? So on component did mount, I just do a new Google Maps circle, same way as we did in the JavaScript example, in the code sandbox. I pass it a few options. I pass it the map. I'll talk about where the map comes from in a second. And I pass it some basic options. Once I've created the circle, then that's it, it's on the map. And then I put the circle inside the state. Okay, so I'm saving my circle so I can later use it. And then, okay, so this is the instantiation. Okay, so once the component mounts, I just create a new Google Maps object, and then on component will unmount, I take this circle and I do set map to null. That basically makes it go away, and it's like, I don't know, garbage collected or whatever. So this is handling, so whenever you mount or unmount the component, we take care of putting it on the map and taking it off the map. So that's the instantiating. Now we can take a look at the how do we do prop changes? How do we translate that to changes on the map? So this is our, this is some TypeScript definitions. This is our circle class with all the life cycles that we'll look at. There's a few functions here that we don't really use actually. We need to think if we really need them. So, okay, so each component has two objects. We define the event map and the updater map. So, what's the event map? So if I look at the documentation for the circle in the Google Maps API, so I'm going to look at the Google Maps docs quickly. Let's look for the circle class. Okay, so let's take the circle for example. I use these docs a ton. They're really helpful. Okay, so we have the constructor that takes circle options, and we have these getter methods, and we have these setter methods. So the setter methods are important because everything that has a setter method is something we can expose as a prop. So if circle has set center, we can have the center prop, and then it will call this set draggable. We could have a draggable prop, everything here. And of course there's the super prop, which is options, because options pretty much holds everything you can change on a circle. And it has the events. So you have the center changed event, the click event, the double click event, like every event you can have. And each event calls a callback if you register it. So now if I'm going back to the code, so the event map is basically an object that maps between the name of the Google Maps event name, and it maps between that and the name of the callback prop we're going to have. So I want to put a callback that reacts to every center change. So I'm going to pass the on center changed callback, okay, the prop, sorry, to the circle. And that will be called whenever the center changed. Same for click, double click, drag end, mouse down, whatever we have to offer. Radius changed. So this is the event map. And the updater map is a map that has functions. So every property, whenever the property changes, so this function is going to be called. Whenever center changes, we're going to be calling this function with the circle instance and with the new circle that has been passed. That's like the new property value. Okay, if you have any questions at any time, if I'm going too fast, too slow, whatever, just tell me, and I'll go over it again. So, and then I just call instance.setCenter. So it's the same thing we do in the Google Maps. I set the center to the new center. So every property the circle exposes has one of these. And we'll see in a second how these get called. But we define an updater map and an event map on every component. So we looked at instantiation and we looked at the objects we defined. So now let's look at where the magic happens. So pretty much everything that what binds this library together happens in the function, this long named function, apply updaters to props and register events. Okay, so it's kind of self-describing. It gets the updater map, the event map, it gets the previous props and the next props, and it gets the instance, which is the instance we created on the map. So, okay, it's positioned inside the helpers file. So now let's look at this one. It does two things, like its name states. It applies the updater to the next props, and it registers events. Okay, so that's the event handling and the prop change handling. So let's look at apply updater to next props. Basically what it does, it goes over each key in the updater map. Okay, each key in the updater map is a key and a function. So now we look at the value of that prop. Like let's say our keys are center, draggable, those are our keys, and the functions are the handler functions we saw. So we look at the next prop value and we look at the previous prop value, and if it changed, we apply the function. That's it. So if the center changed over, like, I don't know, something changed in the state, in its parent, and the center changed. So I'm going to look at the next center value, previous center value. If I see it changed, I call the function, which would be center in this case. I pass it the instance, the next value, and then it does what we saw, which is it calls the center function with the instance and the new center. Okay, so if I'm going back to this function, so that's it. That's all it does. That's how we handle prop changes and translate them into changes on the map. Okay, and now we can look at the register events function. It does reduce. It just loops over the event map. Okay, and it takes the event map, it maps between the React event name and the Google event name. Okay, so we have the Google event name, which would be like something like center underscore changed, and the React event name would be on center changed. So if the user, what this line does, line 33 says, if the user defined a callback, like if the user passed on center changed, if it is a function, then register an event listener on this instance with this Google event name, and when it triggers, trigger the callback that was passed. Okay, so that's it. We just go over all the possible events this instance could receive. If the user passed the callback for them, then we register that callback. So that's what the register events does. We have unregister events, which is called on unmount. It basically goes over all the events and it does remove listener for them. So the magic apply updaters to props and register events. It also returns the registered events. Why does it return them? So we can later pass them to the unregister. So that's just basically it. That's everything the library does. There's a few components that are a bit more non-trivial, but really nothing too complicated. There's a few components we didn't. Okay, I'm going to talk about a few more stuff in a bit. So we have the map. Each instance needs to be connected to the map. That's how the circle really draws itself on the map. I tell it, your map is the Google map. How does that happen? We use the context API. I'm not gonna bore you with. You can look at the Google Map component. Basically, it has a context provider, and it creates a Google Map instance and it passes it down in the context, and then each component has access to the context using this line. This is kind of a new line. It got in React 16.4 or something. So that basically means that this component has access to the map context, and it has this context, which is the map. Okay, so this holds the map. So that's how I give every instance. I tell it your map is this dot context. That is the map. What else? We have the load script component. You can check it out. I won't show you that, but basically I can just go through some more components, but they look exactly the same. We have the event map, we have the updater map, which has the properties that are available for this component. Each component is a bit different. We have the TypeScript definitions, and then it looks exactly the same. Instantiate, save in state, apply updaters and register events, and so on did update, whenever the component updates, we unregister events and then we re-register them. The reason is if the user changed the event handler he wants, so we can check if he changed it, but it's just I don't know, the easiest thing is to just clean everything, do everything from the start. It doesn't cost us anything. And that's it, basically. We expose some class methods that let you get the value of the props, but because you're the one passing the value of the props, then I'm not even sure what the use case for these functions is. Okay, so I want to talk about a few other things we have in the library, and that's some things we need work on. So first of all, we have an index.ts which exports all the components. You can see some of them are commented out, which means that they haven't been implemented yet. Okay, so we have image map type, street view, some street view stuff. We have info box, marker cluster, marker with label. So all of these haven't been implemented yet. And some have been implemented, but maybe not with all the features. So one thing we need to do is just implement the remaining components. You can look at the Google Maps reference to see how to use them, and then you can see how to implement them, and whatever you need. If you decide to take something on you and you have any questions, feel free to Slack me, and I'll definitely help you out. Another thing we need help with is docs. So how does the docs work? It works with something called style guidist. Let's just fire up the docs. You can fire them using yarn docs dev. It's going to run the style guidist server. How does it work? Basically, if you look at the components, you could see that next to each TSX file, you have an MD file. So the MD is a markdown file. You can write some JSX in it. So basically, it uses some kind of script loaded component that makes sure to render it only when the script has loaded. we have a map and we have the circle, and that's it. And then the documentation will show the example. Let me just fire that up. I'm gonna need my API key again. So something that's been tons of complaints in the old Google Maps library, they did like a change where you have to have an API key. So basically the old docs are just unusable. So in order for someone to be able to use the docs, we tell them, first of all, you have to put in an API key. Why is it taking so much time to compile? So I didn't go over like the TypeScript settings and stuff like that. If you wanna, if you have like something specific you want me to go over, then just let me know. I'm just trying to keep it a bit shallow so I won't waste too much of your time. Okay, so these are the docs. So in the introduction, it basically tells you that you have to have an API key. Then you put your API key here, you do set key, and then it's saved in the session. I did like this small component that saves it in the session. So even if you refresh, it's going to reload with your key already there. A bit of getting started and the components. So the prop tables, it gets automatically generated. That's very cool. Because of the TypeScript definitions, it can automatically generate this. So if we look at an example like the circle, so first of all, you can see that a lot of components don't have examples. So something we definitely want to do is add examples, and if there's any interesting information you think that that the user needs, then definitely we can write it here. So like here's an example, like the overlay view. So I did a small overlay view here, and the circle. So you have just a circle, basically. Not very sophisticated examples, but you can view the code on each one of them. And the very cool thing about the style guidist is that you can like actually just change the code here, and it's gonna, as you see, it updates in real time. So that's very nice. So you can like really play with you don't have access to state and stuff like that, but you can just play with anything here, and it will just work. So that's cool. So these are the docs. So I guess like the main, first of all, I'm not sure if it's the most updated, but there's a issue in the repo. This is the repo, React Google Maps API. So there's like a contributors are welcome issue, which lists the things that need to be done. So I'm not sure if it's updated. I think it is, but you have like the components that need to be done. We actually did search box. Oh no, we actually did autocomplete instead, like it says here. So there's docs, there's some other examples you need to write, some cleanup. We want to start writing tests, migration guide. So that's like pretty much the stuff on the roadmap. And one last thing I want to show you is what branch am I on? I've started with like POC that pretty much rewrites everything. Wait, I'm on the TypeScript branch. I never use the Git here in VS Code. Sorry, one sec. Okay, so I'm going to show you the hooks branch if this is something that interests you. It's not really, I've got a POC that's working, but I'm sure it doesn't fit every component yet. We're going to have to just make it a bit more finished so it supports every component. But I want to show you the exact same thing I showed you with that big ugly class with like a lot less lines of code. So if I look at the same circle class, so I still have the event map, I still have the updater map, and I'm importing the use map component hook. So I've got, and the entire class has been reduced to this nice line, so it becomes like a nice one-liner. The hook is obviously does have a few lines in it, but it's also really simple. So this is how I set my state. I do the instance and set instance with the use state. With the use context, I just grab the map context, which is our map. The previous props was a bit of a challenge. I'll show you that in a second. But basically, I pass in the class name, which is like the Google Maps class name, and then I create an instance. If it hasn't been created yet, then I create new Google Maps, and it would be like circle or rectangle or whatever you pass it. Then I set the state, I set the instance, and I set the map. I tell it your map is the context, which like makes it appear on the map. And then the use effect is what calls the apply updaters to props on every change. So I could have left it at that and not pass it like previous props and next props and just tell it apply all the updaters all the time on every render. But because I don't want to do that, so I do want to keep previous props, which is something that isn't really supported in hooks. So I just used another hook called use previous, which uses the ref, which it uses use ref. It's something I copied from Stack Overflow, but basically it uses the ref to save the previous props. And then the previous props are always saved on the ref. Every render I update them with the updated props. So I know it's like a lot to look at, but basically just that's the main idea of how it works. And then I return the cleanup function, which does the unregistered events. And I probably need to add instance set map null, I guess, because that's another thing that happens on cleanup. So this is the hook. So yeah, pretty much cleans up the library really nicely. So I need to put it in some more components and make sure that it works in all of them. But this is like the what's on the roadmap. And yeah, that's what I have for this introduction. Sorry if it was like too speedy or whatever. But if you have any questions, then feel free. And like just as I said, feel free to write me on Slack or whatever if you have any questions while working on it. If you